Hi everyone, good morning. Hope you're doing well on this rainy Thursday. At least it is over here in Antwerp, Belgium. Um, and welcome to our webinar. I hope everyone can see my screen. I think you can. We're going to talk a little bit about Neo4j licensing. It's a topic dear to my heart, but I'll also introduce a little bit about the company and the platform to you guys. I know that there's probably going to be people here that are not as familiar with that as possible, but we'll focus on the licensing part and have a Q&A at the end. The webinar should take about 30 minutes, and then we can wrap up. So hey, Neo4j, I'm hoping you guys have a little bit of familiarity with both the company and the products. We kind of think of ourselves as a platform for connected data. It's been a platform that we've been building for a long time. You know, Neo4j, the open source project, was actually founded in 2001, and that seems like you know, ice ages, at least to me. But it was founded quite some time ago, and it became a true database, a true commercial offering as well. I want to say around 2009, 2010. I've been with the company since 2012, and we've really built something amazing here. You know, it's a company of about 280 employees these days. All focused on graphs, all focused on graph technologies, and with some amazing customers out there, as you can see and as you can learn later on. Quite a journey, and I guess the red line or the blue-green line that runs through that journey is really one of pioneering and of innovation, where we've continuously, together with the open source community, build new technologies, build graph technologies, connected data technologies that advance the industry, right? That really make this something quite amazing, quite impressive by now. I would say, when I joined Neo4j in 2012, it was quite an immature technology at the time, in the sense that basically you had to be a rockstar developer to be able to use it in any meaningful way. I would claim that today that's no longer the case. I think today everyone can use Neo4j. If you're a reasonably IT skilled and reasonably you know how to do an Excel macro, so to speak. You have some end user computing capabilities, then you should be able to use Neo4j, and that's amazing. That's pretty amazing, because it is a kind of advanced technology with a lot of interesting applications, right? And these applications have created really a market that's accelerating very much so. I mean, these are some quotes. There have been some recent quotes from other analysts. The graph market is excuse me, the fastest part of the database, of the data market out there. If you look at the DB engine stats and all of those types of things, it really is a fast accelerating market, which we're excited to be part of. And we've got some unbelievable applications out there, right? I mean, some of these things, non-profit applications like the Panama Papers, right, and the Paradise Papers, and more recently the implant files, pioneered by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, but also scientific, more scientifically oriented applications like what we're seeing in many universities or even at NASA these days, where people are actually using connected data graph databases for really interesting research applications, but also lots of commercial applications, right? I mean, if eBay is is implementing a knowledge graph, or if Airbnb is doing that, or UBS is doing that, then guess what? That's for commercial reasons. That's because they want to better serve their customers. Because they want to, either reduce costs or increase revenues, right? So it's quite an interesting space. Continues to be quite an interesting space, and everyone seems to be agreeing with that. And the numbers just show it, right? I mean, if you look at the number of downloads or the number of events or the number of developers or meetups, it's really, really quite apparent that this thing has momentum. So there's a lot of interest for graph technologies, but I guess you knew that because otherwise you wouldn't be attending this webinar. Let's talk a little bit about what's in this platform, what's in this leading platform for connected data that we're talking about here, and then we'll switch to the licensing part immediately after that. Well, first of all, I guess the use cases are driving this adoption, right? Whether you're talking about recommendation systems or fraud detection systems or operations systems for network management or master data management, knowledge graphs, identity and access management. These are kind of like the core sweet spot use cases that people are using to bring these advanced new connected data technologies into their organizations, right? I mean, people don't start with just any application. They try to look at the most advanced use cases, the most high value use cases, to bring that technology into their organizations. And that's what we're looking at here, especially things like fraud detection. Real-time fraud detection is an unbelievable use case for Neo4j, right? Because what we're seeing is that you've got lots of people that know how to spot irregularities based on individual transactions, but they struggle to see the patterns, the connections between the individual transactions that actually compose bigger fraud patterns. Or when you're looking at master data, when you're trying to understand the entire data landscape in your organization, you're trying to create like a 360 degree view of your customer or some kind of data lineage capability. This is where something like a graph database is really adding a lot of value by doing things that you couldn't do before, right? By really enabling new types of applications. And that's what's driving this, right? This is what's driving this adoption of graph technology in the industry, right? Whether you're a retailer or a hotel chain or a package handler, this is what's driving these new applications. Really big implementations, oftentimes large graph workloads that are really enabled by what we call the graph platform. At the heart of the graph platform, we see Neo4j, the graph database, right? The graph database that you may have already experimented with. And we'll talk more about that later in this webinar. But this is just the heart, if I may call it that way, right? So what we really see in our user community and in our customer community is that people need more than just a database, right? They need things around the database to get more value from the database more quickly, right? So we've been focused a lot on building blocks around the database. Obviously we've been investing and evolving the core database products. It's not now at version 3.5, but I guess it's also important to understand that we're building stuff around this, right? And the things that we're building around that are all leveraging the core capabilities of the database, right? The transactional analytical workloads that we can enable with that core database, the performance that we can get from that, right? So deep traversals, lots and lots of so-called join operations that are enabled by this, and if in an agile, evolving data model that can be easily visualized, easily exposed to business users and developers at the same time, and that also leverages your hardware investments in the best possible way, right? So this is what's driving the core of the graph platform, the graph database, right? But we're putting stuff around that. We're putting discovery and visualization tools around that, for example. We're putting, developer tools around that. We're putting integration tools around that, and we're putting analytical tools around that. And I don't know if you've recently looked at some of the capabilities that we have in terms of visualization. I mean, most people will actually know the Neo4j browser, right? Which is where I can actually interact with the database, and I can look things up. I can explore that. I can people might know the graph visualization part that we provide with the Neo4j browser, right? And that's a great capability. But as part of the graph platform, we're also providing things like Neo4j Bloom these days. And you should, if you haven't taken a look at this yet, you really should. It's a really interesting extension of the visualization capability that we provide with the graph platform, and that enables a whole bunch of new business-oriented database applications. We've also done a lot of work on integration capabilities, making it easier for people to integrate their graph database into a broader ecosystem of IT technologies, ETL tooling, extracting data from other systems, transforming them into a graph, and then loading them into a graph database. Right? There's a lot of interesting technologies that we're providing there, and we're also doing a lot of work around machine learning and AI. It's kind of the hot topic these days out there. We're really spending quite a bit of time on that. Why? Because we see that the graph data model is actually providing a lot of value to AI and to machine learning, and it allows people to, find new patterns and learn and train their models more quickly when they use the graph model underneath that, right? So that's kind of the update that I wanted to give you on the core Neo4j capability and the graph database that's at the heart of it, and the graph platform that sits around that. Now let's talk a little bit about what you came here for, which is the licensing breakdown, right? I mean, I guess we're in the same situation that many other open source vendors have been in for quite some time, right? At the end of the day, we are huge fans of open source, right? Open source has been part and parcel of our evolution for decades, right? Since 2001, when we started, scratching an itch in a garage in Malmö, Sweden, right? Three guys that had, a problem that they needed to solve, and they decided, hey, why don't we solve it by building a database? It's a crazy thought, right? But ever since that first idea, we were finding a balance between, making sure that we can provide the open source tooling and share the innovation and accelerate each other's capabilities by sharing the source code of everything that we do with a commercial requirement, right? Because at the end of the day, the streets are littered with open source projects that died a slow and painful death because they didn't have a revenue model. And I guess that's where Neo4j has proven to be quite different. We continue to love the open source community, and we continue to invest massive amounts of time and effort into the open source community. But at the same time, we have to build a business, right? Because that's the best way that we know of to make sure that Neo4j is going to be around in 10 years from now, or in 20 years from now, right? We kind of have to balance the open source component with the commercial component, right? But I can't stress it enough, right? We're really an open source company. Me personally as well, I've invested enormous amounts of time in building a community, supporting a community, blogging about it, podcasting about it, all of the stuff that doesn't really benefit the commercial short-term needs, but which really do help us create the market and create the awareness that we need to be successful. So in terms of licensing, what that has led to, right, is basically that we have 2 editions of one core database, right? And I'm only talking about the database here right now, right? So the Neo4j Community Edition is what we started with. It's the open source licensed product, right? It's the product that everyone loves and uses as much as they possibly can. It's GPL licensed, it's free as in beer and as in speech, right? So everything we develop in the community edition is shared with the community, is open sourced, is freely available to whoever wants to use it, whoever wants to fork it, whoever wants to play with it, right? But we fund that with an enterprise edition, right? We fund that development with an enterprise edition, which we believe is a better product, right? It's a greater product, even greater product, right? And has a number of additional capabilities and support and licensing around that, right? In principle, the enterprise edition is a payable product, right? It's something that we market commercially, but we make lots of exceptions to this. We make lots of, I would say more investment-oriented exceptions to this. Not only because we are kind and good people, but also because we believe that builds the bigger markets, makes the pie bigger. Instead of just focusing on our part of the pie, right? All of the additional platform features, like Bloom, like ETL, like machine learning and AI, are basically focused on the enterprise edition. I mean, there are some parts of it that are available on the community edition, but the core of everything we do on top of the database is enterprise edition oriented. I mean, at the end of the day, this is also a monetization strategy for us to build a bigger business. Right, so 2 editions, 1 core database, one of them is open source and is free as in beer and as in speech. The other one is a commercial product, right? Philosophically, I think you should think of it in the following way. The community edition is absolutely a great product, right? It's feature complete for the individual developer or a small hobby project, right? The enterprise edition is a full product that is, got more features, but is really targeted at organizations, enterprises that are not just developing, but also deploying critical applications. Right, that's how you should think of it philosophically, and that kind of explains how we deal with the different products and how we try to find that balance. Right, the community edition continues to be a fantastic source of adoption, of feedback, of innovation, of integration, and it's really we try to facilitate all of that stuff very, very strongly by, for example, having a fantastic community website. But there's a lot of other open fora where our Neo4j graph database community can come together, right? There's the community site, which I strongly recommend that you take a look at. There's a lot of technical discussion going on there, but there's also a lot of non-technical discussion going on there. Like, for example, just yesterday we announced something that I think is very interesting to the open source community around being a founding member of the GraphQL community, right? Which is the graph query language. It's more of an API really to facilitate new types of applications with great GraphQL interfaces. So fantastic discussions going on there, resources, knowledge bases, We're very active on Stack Overflow, very active on our website as well, and all of that happens in open fora, right? So we actually have a significant team. I think it's like 10 people or something that are only thinking about this type of work, right? Supporting our community, and we continue to do that. We really love that. But as I said, we need to kind of balance it with the commercial interest. We need to make sure that Neo4j can be around in 20 years from now by having a revenue model. And that's why we have our Enterprise Edition, and that's why we have the platform products around the Enterprise Edition. And I guess in a nutshell, you can basically look at this as 3 different things. The first is that the Enterprise Edition will have quite a few different features from the Community Edition. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but there's really quite a few additional and different characteristics of the Enterprise Edition compared to the Community Edition. This ranges from scalability to performance to security to manageability, all of the stuff that, again, philosophically align with the deployment strategies that an enterprise might have, but there's a lot of different features out there, right, in the Enterprise Edition, and you can try those out in many different ways. It has a very different support model as well. If you're a commercial organization or a government organization that needs to, count on support, then guess what? We will have commercial support for the product that is delivered as part of the Enterprise Edition subscription, right? So that means that not only do you get different features, but you also don't have to go to Stack Overflow to plow through, thousands of questions on Neo4j queries, whatever, right? But you can just, ask a question, submit a ticket, and expect a response time within a given time frame, an agreed SLA. Right? So very different support characteristics, right, for the Enterprise Edition. And then thirdly, the license is also different, right? So the Community Edition is GPL licensed, which is free as in beer and as in speech, right? It's the license that other open source behemoths like MySQL also have been using for decades. It's a very popular open source license. And it gives you a lot of rights, but it also gives you some responsibilities and obligations, right? The Enterprise Edition has a very different license. It has a commercial license. It's not an open source license, right? So which means that you don't have to abide by all of the open source rules and regulations, right? You can, for example, have derived works, right? Applications that you build on top of Neo4j, which are completely different and proprietary, if that would be something that you would want to do, right? On the open source edition, a derived work needs to be open sourced, right? That's how the GPL works. On the commercial edition, on the Enterprise Edition, that is not the case, right? You own that IP. You can still open source it if you want to, but you don't need to. And this is something that enterprises typically care about quite a lot, right? So 3 core differences between the Enterprise Edition and the Community Edition: different features, different support, and a different license, right? So let's dig into that a little bit. And these are a couple of screenshots that may look like an eye test, and I don't want you to spend too much time on this. The Enterprise Edition features are similar but different, is what I'm trying to say here. All of this stuff is on our website. You can just go to neo4j.com/licensing, and you will find the core differences between the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition explained to you, right? So the first category of features that are different are things like database features, right? Like, for example, things like indexing is very, very different on both databases. Security is very, very different on both databases, right? So these are database features that work in completely different ways between the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition, and you can review that at your own pace on the website. The second thing, I guess, is that's really quite important is that there's a set of architectural features that are very different, right? And the most important one around this is all about scalability and fault tolerance, right? Because the Enterprise Edition, one of the key features that it provides to our customers is clustering, right? Clustering in combination with load balancing and routing, right? So that basically means that you get a system that is always going to be highly available and that can route and load balance your queries to the database that is most suited to answering that query most efficiently. Right, so architecturally, you're looking at something completely different. You're not looking at, lots and lots and lots of Community Edition servers. No, you're looking at a system, a cluster of servers that talk to each other, that work together, that distribute load, that assure fault tolerancy, and that you can count on in your application. Right, so architecturally, that's very, very different. Right. And then lastly here, there's a bunch of platform-oriented features that you will find is quite different. Like, for example, when it comes to things like database integrity, and consistency checking, right? The capabilities that we have in the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition are very different. The size of the database is going to be very different, right? So Community Edition still has a hard limit of how many nodes and relationships you can store into it. The Enterprise Edition really doesn't have those limits anymore, right? So there's a bunch of platform-oriented features that will be different between the two editions. And again, I think you should go to our website and review those in detail. And if you have any questions, then please just reach out to us. Right. In the Enterprise Edition, like I said, the second category of differences is all about how we support it. Right. On the Community Edition, we have open fora where we support your work and where we try to understand, what you're trying to achieve, and where we will and gladly will provide technical assistance for your project, but we will do it in open fora. The Enterprise Edition is a commercial offering where we will, have commercial SLAs for our support capabilities, right? So experienced engineers that know the ropes are going to be helping you. You will submit a ticket, you will describe your question. We might ask you for some log files and all of that type of stuff, where we troubleshoot the problem that you're trying to solve together with you, and then resolve that as soon as possible. And we do this, 24/7 in all time zones, and we try to do that as predictably as possible, right, according to the SLAs, right. We also have consulting capabilities, right. So that means that we not just do stuff remotely in our engineering offices. No, we also come on site, right? So if you're an Enterprise Edition customer, we will hope to be working with you on your project, and we will have experienced consultants ready to go to help you with this, right? So as I said before, the Enterprise Edition is available in different ways, and it might be a surprise to you, but we actually provide the Enterprise Edition for free as well. We really believe that we want to have our users to have the best possible experience with Neo4j, which is why we want them to use the best possible product, which is why we're making the Enterprise Edition also available to as many people as possible. And of course, we want to get paid for some of it, but we also give it away for free. There's three types of freely available enterprise editions. You can see them on the left here. If you're an individual developer, then don't worry about it. You can get Enterprise Edition for free. You get that by downloading the Neo4j desktop, right? This is like a management environment for Neo4j, where you can run different Neo4j instances. You can load projects. You can, um, edit configuration, that type of stuff. And as part of the Neo4j desktop, you get a developer license for Neo4j Enterprise, right? Yes, we will ask you to register. Yes, we will send you a newsletter once a month and stuff like that. But that's a small price to pay to get, the best possible product. We also give Neo4j away for free to educational institutions, right? So if you're an academic that is not going to be satisfied with a developer license, right? So for example, you need your entire department to be able to use Neo4j Enterprise, then we have educational licenses available for you, where yes, you will need to sign a few forms, and yes, you will need to sign some paperwork, but we will give you the license to use the Enterprise Edition for free for your academic research and advance the world of knowledge, right? And last but not least, we make Neo4j Enterprise available for free to startups, and I'll come back to that in a second. Right? If you're a startup, we've been a startup ourselves. We're still a startup in many ways. Then we understand what that means, and we understand the limitations that you might have, and stuff like that. So we actually on certain conditions, but we will give you a free license of Neo4j. And then secondly, of course, the Enterprise Edition, we will have some commercial models as well, where we want to get paid for the added value that we provide, right? So that's the whole philosophy of how we go about this. We basically think that if you're getting value from our software, then at some point we need to be able to benefit from that as well, and we want to have a discussion with you on how we can do that. Right, there is a startup license also available that is paid. Right, you can see startup license both on the left-hand side with the freely available ones and with the commercially available ones. Why? That's just when you are a startup and you want support, then support, that means time, so you're going to have to pay for that. But in principle, we have paid commercial subscriptions for Neo4j. Right, so it's not a permanent license that we provide for the Enterprise Edition. It's actually a subscription-based license, because that allows you to pay as you need it, right? You pay for it now for a year or 2 years or 3 years. If you no longer need it, then you just stop the subscription. The subscription is annual, and it renews as your project evolves. The parameters that we use to come up with a meaningful number, commercial number, monetary number to reflect the value that we provide are actually threefold, fourfold actually, sorry. There's 4 parameters that we look at. The first is the number of servers that you're going to be using. If this is just a departmental application with 1 server, then we're going to have a different price for that compared to if you have like 500 servers spread across the globe, right? The number of cores is also a good approximation of value for us. If you've got a small 4-core machine, which is about what most phones have these days, right? Then we're going to charge you something different when you run it on a 48-core server, right? So because again, that's an indication, an approximation of value, right? Same thing with RAM. If you have more RAM in your servers, then that probably means that you've got a bigger data set or more complex queries running on that server. So we're going to have a different commercial fee for that bigger server. right? And then last but not least, we value long-term relationships, long-term partnerships with our clients. So if we have a contract in place that is of a longer duration, then we will also have different commercial capabilities for that. Right, so 4 parameters: number of servers, number of CPU cores, and number of RAM. And last but not least, the duration of the agreement is going to influence the type of commercial agreement that you will get from us, right? For startups, I want to come back to the fact that these were featured both on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, so both on the free side and on the paid side. On the free side, this is really where we want to help early stage startups, right? People with less than 20 employees and less than $3 million of annual revenue. We understand these people don't want to fork out a couple of thousands or tens of thousands of euros to pay for a subscription. So we'd rather have you just run with it and give you the software for free, right? With traction, right, that means that you're a startup that is probably a little bit bigger than 20 employees, right? You're probably not making money yet, but you need support. You need some kind of commercial support because the application is getting too critical, and we need to be covering your back, right? So the early stage startups are completely for free, and you run your own thing. The with traction startups is actually a paid thing where we charge you a small fee to cover support costs, right? So now one more thing that I want to say about startups is that this is actually going to be revised in 2 weeks from now. Some small changes that are going to happen to that, but we'll probably update you when that happens. I can't say too much about that now because we want to make a big announcement on the 26th, but rest assured that we're actually going to make the startup licenses even more interesting for smaller organizations. We currently have more than 500 startups using Neo4j, and we want to expand on that. There's a great FAQ on our website. If you go to neo4j.com/licensing, there's a bunch of commonly asked questions, right? That you can review if you still have questions after this webinar. Do you have to pay for it? Is there something for startups? How does that work? I'm an academic. What do I need to do? I'm a student. What do I need to do? I've got a hobby project. There's a bunch of questions here that I think you'll want to review after this webinar. You'll also get the slides to this presentation, of course. There's one more thing that I'd like to cover. It was highlighted on the previous slide as well. It's part of the FAQ. There's a specific category of collaboration of licensing that we haven't touched on yet, and that's the part where organizations are actually building product, building services on top of Neo4j that they then bill to their clients, right? So this is typically referred to as an OEM license or an ISV license. Original equipment manufacturer is typically where you embed it into some kind of hardware, like a network equipment device or a storage equipment device or whatever you want to call it, right? Or ISV, independent software vendor, right? And you're creating a new product, a new application that you sell and or ship to your clients, right? Now, that's a very specific type of license. Why? Because you essentially redistribute Neo4j. You're not using it for your own purposes, but you're distributing it to your channel, to your customers, and that's That's actually a very interesting way of working, and we love that. We have large organizations like Cisco and HP and Ericsson, and lots of big names that are actually doing this with Neo4j today. They're embedding Neo4j into their solutions, and we have a very specific partner program for that, where there's some details of it on our website as well. But we really want to work with you to find the best possible licensing form there. Sometimes this is really kind of an intimate conversation that we need to have, right? Because we really need to align our value parameters to your value parameters, right? So the traditional things like number of servers or number of CPUs or that type of stuff, that just doesn't work anymore. And we have to count something completely different. Like, for example, what we've done with other clients is we really look at their business and we find a parameter, we find a measure of value that is very much core to their way of working and not ours. Right, so I'd like to invite conversations around that. If you feel like you have a case where you want to embed Neo4j, then please talk to us about that. That brings me to the end of this overview. Took me a little bit longer than I expected, but I hope that's okay.